It's 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday in South Brooklyn. You're sitting in the back booth of a social club with no name on the door. The window is painted black. A radio hums low in the corner. Sinatra, barely audible over the clink of espresso cups. Across the table, a man you've known for 11 years slides an envelope toward you. He doesn't look at you when he does it. Outside, a Cadillac idles at the curb, headlights off, engine running. Nobody says your name. Nobody has to. In 20 minutes, a man 3 blocks away will stop breathing. And you'll be the reason why. You won't remember the drive home. You won't remember taking off your coat. You'll only remember standing in your own kitchen afterward, washing your hands in water so hot it turns your knuckles pink, staring at a sink that will never quite feel clean again. This is what it means to live as a Mafia Hitman in 1950s America. You weren't born into this. You were born into Bensonhurst, or Red Hook, or the Lower East Side, tenement buildings stacked with families who spoke more Sicilian than English. Your father worked the docks. Your mother stretched 1 chicken across 5 dinners. You remember the smell of garlic and gunpowder cold winters, the coal stove that never quite warmed the back room. Down the block, there was a man everyone called Uncle, though he wasn't anyone's uncle. He wore a camel hair coat in a neighborhood where most men owned 1 coat, period. Kids didn't ask questions when he walked by. Adults nodded like he was a passing bishop. You noticed the silence he created just by existing. You wanted that silence for yourself. Down the block, there was a man everyone called Uncle, though he wasn't anyone's uncle. He wore a camel hair coat in a neighborhood where most men owned 1 coat, period. His shoes were always polished, even in the slush of February. Kids didn't ask questions when he walked by. Adults nodded like he was a passing bishop. Shopkeepers gave him the good tomatoes, the ones kept behind the counter. You noticed the silence he created just by existing. You wanted that silence for yourself. At 10, you watched 2 men in dark coats carry a wounded friend of your father's up 4 flights of stairs instead of to a hospital, because hospitals asked questions. At 12, you ran messages for $2, folded slips of paper you never read, delivered to men who never smiled. At 15, you watched a bookmaker count more cash in 1 night than your father made in a month, stacking bills like a man dealing cards. At 17, you delivered a package you weren't allowed to open. You didn't open it. That was the test. You passed. Small jobs became bigger jobs. Driving a car and waiting. Standing outside a door and watching the street. Carrying a bat to a barber shop that hadn't paid its insurance that month. Nobody handed you a badge or a title. Trust in this world isn't given. It's built 1 silence at a time. The night they made you was the night everything changed. A back room above a butcher shop on Mulberry Street. 10 men in dark suits standing in a circle. A single candle burning on a table covered in a black cloth. Someone hands you a picture of a saint, a small paper card, worn soft at the edges. They prick your trigger finger with a pin. Your blood drips onto the saint's painted face. The card is lit on fire. You hold it as it burns down to your fingertips, repeating an oath in a language your grandmother spoke better than you do. Omerta. Silence, even under torture. Silence, even in front of your wife. Silence, even to God, if he asks. You are told the structure now, because now you're inside it. A boss sits at the top, untouchable, insulated by layers of men who would die before saying his name to a cop. Below him, an underboss. Below him, capos, captains, each commanding a crew. Below them, soldiers. You, a button man, a maid man. There is no promotion ceremony beyond this one. There is only the next order. You go home that night and kiss your sleeping children on the forehead, the smell of burnt paper still on your fingertips, and you tell yourself the oath was just words. It wasn't. It was a contract signed in fire, and contracts like that only end one way. Morning comes early, and it comes ordinary. black coffee in a chipped cup at a diner on Mulberry, the newspaper folded to the racing section, a nod to the man behind the counter who never charges you. By 10, you're at the social club, a windowless room thick with cigar smoke and the click of dominoes, men in $200 suits, more than most Americans made in a month, talk in half sentences about the thing and our friend and that situation on Flatbush. You collect debts on Thursdays, a tailor who's 3 weeks late, a restaurant owner who thinks he can skip a payment because his cousin's a cop. You don't raise your voice. You don't have to. You set a hand on the counter, and men who owe money suddenly remember where they left it. The smell of the club never changes. Cuban cigars, anisette, old wood polished with lemon oil, a deck of cards worn soft at the corners from 1,000 hands of Briscola. You wear a gray flannel suit tailored on Mulberry Street, a fedora tilted just enough to matter, a gold watch that was a gift, not a purchase. Underneath your jacket, a .38 revolver rides in a shoulder holster, so familiar against your ribs that you forget it's there, until you don't. In the afternoons, you drive a black '54 Cadillac Fleetwood with white wall tires down streets, where every shopkeeper waves first. You stop at a bakery that gives you free cannoli, not because you ask, but because everyone remembers what happened to the last man who tried charging you. Bookmaking runs from a candy store 2 blocks over. A payphone in the back rings constantly with horse bets from Aqueduct and Belmont. A kid no older than 14 keeps a runner's list memorized instead of written, because paper is evidence and memory isn't. Every Friday, protection money moves from restaurant to bar to butcher shop, envelopes changing hands over handshakes that look, to anyone watching, like old friends greeting each other. Nobody counts the money in public. Nobody has to. At home, your wife asks what you did today. You tell her you checked on some properties. She doesn't ask again. She's learned, the way all the wives learn, that some doors in a marriage stay closed. Your children think you sell insurance. You buy them Schwinn bicycles for Christmas, and a rosary blessed in Rome for their confirmations, and you sit at the head of a Sunday dinner table loaded with braciole and wine, and for 1 hour a week, you almost believe you're just a businessman. Then the phone rings, and you put your fork down. The first time is never clean. They don't tell you that beforehand. You expect it to feel like power. Instead, your hands shake for 3 days afterward. You can't eat. You lie next to your wife and stare at the ceiling, listening to your own heartbeat like it belongs to someone else. Your capo tells you this feeling passes. He's right. That's the part that scares you more than the first time did. However, the fear doesn't disappear. It changes shape. You start checking mirrors on your drive home. You start sitting with your back to the wall in restaurants, facing the door. Meanwhile, other families are watching yours. The Genovese crew. The Bonanno crew. A wrong word at the wrong table can start a war that ends with your name in a headline. Or worse, no headline at all. Just a car found abandoned near Sheepshead Bay. Unfortunately, the government has started watching too. Black sedans park a little too long outside the social club. Telephone lines click strangely when you pick them up. You start talking in code, even to your own crew. Even worse, the trust that took years to build can vanish in one bad rumor. An informant, a rat, somebody's cousin talking too loud in a bar in Yonkers. You watch friends disappear, not killed, just gone, absorbed into witness protection or a plea deal, their names erased from every conversation. Eventually, the stress catches up to everyone. Ulcers, heart attacks at 50, bottles of scotch that used to last a month, gone in a week. You've seen made men, untouchable, feared, respected, reduced to shaking hands and Milltown pills prescribed by a doctor who doesn't ask questions. Prison looms over every conversation now, a shadow nobody names directly. You've watched men led out of restaurants in handcuffs mid-meal, napkins still tucked into their collars. You've watched wives faint on courthouse steps, reporters shoving cameras into their tear-streaked faces. You've sat in a lawyer's office that smelled like leather and cigarettes, going over what to say and, more importantly, what never to say, to a grand jury that already seems to know too much. Every knock on the door now carries two possible meanings, and only one of them lets you keep your freedom. You remember exactly where you were in March of 1951 when Frank Costello testified before the Kefauver Committee. Millions of Americans, glued to their new television sets, watched only Costello's hands, his face kept off camera by his own lawyers. Those nervous, fidgeting hands became the most famous hands in America overnight. Your social club went quiet watching that broadcast. Men who never showed fear looked, for the first time, like ordinary people caught in a spotlight. Then came November of 1957. 60-some men in dark suits and fine hats, gathering at a quiet estate in the small town of Appalachian, New York. You know men who were there. You know men who ran through the woods in $1,000 suits when state troopers showed up, ditching cash and jewelry in the mud, caught not by guns but by muddy shoes and torn trousers. Vito Genovese was there. Joe Bonanno was there. After that day, the government stopped pretending the mafia was a myth invented by overzealous cops. Congress took notice. Newspapers ran the mugshots for weeks. The FBI, which had spent years insisting organized crime didn't really exist on a national scale, suddenly launched a task force with a new name, the Top Hoodlum Program. Agents who once ignored the social clubs now sat parked outside them in unmarked Fords, taking notes on who came and went. Your world, once invisible, was suddenly a national headline, and every headline made your job more dangerous. By the end of the decade, the weight has changed you. The Cadillac still gleams. The suits still fit perfectly. But you flinch at car backfires now. You count exits in every room you enter. You order your coffee to go, even in places you've trusted for years, because sitting still too long feels like an invitation. You've buried friends, some to bullets, some to prison, some to their own hearts giving out under the pressure. You stood at a graveside in Calvary Cemetery last spring, rain soaking through your good overcoat, watching a man you once trusted with your life lowered into the ground because he trusted the wrong person with his. You've missed birthdays waiting on phone calls that only ever bring bad news. You've watched your son look at you the way you once looked at Uncle in his camel hair coat, and it terrifies you because you know exactly what that admiration costs. Late at night, when the house is quiet and your wife is finally asleep, you sit alone at the kitchen table. You think about the boy who ran errands for $2. You think about the silence he wanted so badly. You have it now. Complete, permanent silence. The kind that follows you into every room, every dinner, every prayer you no longer fully believe. The camel hair coat fits you now. But the warmth you imagined as a boy was never really there. It was just fear, tailored well enough to look like respect. And somewhere down the block, another 12-year-old boy is watching you walk by, wondering what it might feel like to be you. He has no idea. Neither did you. Somewhere out there, that boy will grow up chasing the same silence you chased. The same coat, the same watch, the same envelope slid across a table at midnight. He'll learn eventually the way you did. By then, it will already be too late to warn him.